Hello, Brynne. How are you today?
I am great, Stan. So excited to talk about this topic. It's one of my favorites.
Yes, indeed. Referrals are gold, and I think people will be excited about it because I think for a lot of us, it's one that we're not using as much as we can and should, especially given the numbers that are out there in terms of people's willingness to give them.
Mhm.
And thank you for just popping that right in so everyone can see it.
Yeah.
So,
And for those that are listening, we're going to talk about some statistics that we got from Kinsta, KINSTA.com/blog/LinkedIn dash statistics. So I am sending that your way, Stan.
yes, thank you. Yep, so I think you all know us, Stan Robinson. I'm a
Oh,
chief
yeah.
coaching officer here at Social Sales Link, and excited to be here with Brynne Tillman, LinkedIn Whisperer, LinkedIn expert, and founder here at Social Sales Link.
Fun. So let's get started in this party.
Yes, so one of the reasons we wanted to talk about referrals is because they are so powerful. And looking at some of these statistics, even more so than I realized, and it looks like they're becoming increasingly powerful. So, roughly 84% of buyers are strongly influenced by recommendations from friends and family. In this context, of course, we're talking about business colleagues, but the concept is the same. And here's the one that blew my mind. About 91% of customers said they'd be happy to give referrals. But conversely, only about 11% of salespeople actually ask for them. And that is sad. So it's leaving money on the table, literally.
Absolutely. So repeat that again. 91% of customers are willing to give referrals. How many are getting them?
Yep. And about 11% of salespeople are asking for referrals. So
Stan, that's huge.
yeah, yeah. So that's
There are
that's
80% referrals that are not happening that could be.
that could be happening. That could be happening.
Oh my
So yeah, so it's money that is being left on the table, and most of us can't afford to leave money on the table. So that is why referrals are. That's why we wanted to talk about these, because we could see it's an area that if you want a quick way to increase your revenue, build relationships with people who already know you, which is our best source of new business ideally,
Mhm.
referrals are one way to do it. Now, a couple of things about referrals. Number one, when you look at a low cost way of generating leads, it's hard to beat the minimal amount of time it takes to ask for a referral. So, so asking for a referral is free. You don't
It
have to
is.
spend money on ads.
Mhm.
You don't have to try to do things with SEO, but all you have to do is ask. So number one, it's a low cost way of generating leads. Now, statistics also say that up to 50% of referrals convert to actual conversations. And when you think about other prospecting methods,
Mhm.
what percentage of your outreach turns into conversations with other forms of outreach?
You know what's so interesting about this, Stan, when I think about what you're talking about? So many people will say, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. Or when I ask for referrals, they don't know who to introduce me to. We're going to fix that.
Right?
Um, but when you talk about uh, this opportunity that's here that so few people are taking advantage of, I'm blown away at those opportunities that are being left on the table. And I think that, you talk about low cost of client acquisition. If you're, and this is in labor too, right? Like we think of client acquisition, we're paying our sales reps to cold call.
Mhm.
We're paying for software, for campaigns. We're paying when really, especially if you have a seasoned sales team
Team.
that have had amazing clients that love them, why are we cold calling?
Yep.
Why are we spending money on Google ads? Why are we not leveraging the people that already love us? And you're right, it's really free. I mean, it's an amazing, and well, I don't want to jump ahead, but you keep going. But you're totally blowing my mind with some of these stats.
Yep. Now, John, I see John here in chat makes a really good point. You have to perform. In other words, your product or service has to do what you say it's going to do in order to earn referrals. So that's a great point. You can't have a terrible product and expect people to refer you just because they did business with you. So thank you. That's an
Uh,
excellent point, John.
It is, and if I could add to that, unless your client is thrilled with you, don't ask for a referral. Make sure you're fixing what's going on internally.
Yep.
We want all our clients to be as happy as possible, to be as, and, asking for a referral is when we hit nirvana with them. So I
Yep.
love that.
Yep. Exactly.
Mhm.
And another thing about referrals, and these two are related, is that when someone refers you to one of their colleagues or peers,
Mhm.
they're basically transferring their credibility to you.
Ooh.
And that saves a huge amount of time in building that know, like, trust relationship.
Wait,
So
repeat that. That was a magic moment. When someone refers you there,
they're transferring their credibility with the person that they're referring you to you. Now,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead. Go, keep going. This is magic.
So it saves you a tremendous amount of time in terms of building that know, like, and trust relationship, because a lot of salespeople will agree the hardest thing is getting that first conversation.
Mm,
And if someone refers you, and Brynne will be talking about there are different ways to refer, such as name dropping. The golden is when someone makes a phone call with you right there, but that's not going to happen all the time.
right. But
Yes, but regardless, though, one of the most powerful things about referrals is that transfer of credibility. So you don't have to start from scratch the relationship that's already been established between the person giving you the referral and the person you're being referred to. That
yeah, there's so
helps
much
you get started.
magic in this. Like, the way my brain works is I hear you and I start like building, my gears are going. But let's take a look at how vital this is, right? We have built credibility in our network. This is key why we cannot be out connecting and pitching, why we have to be a resource. We have to be of value to our network. We have to be seen as a strong networker because people are, we need to create relationships where people are willing to leverage their credibility for us to meet new people.
Exactly.
So you could ask for referrals all day long, but if they don't feel comfortable referring you, it's not going to happen.
Mhm.
So So I love that. So that's going to go back and as Stan and I go weeks and weeks and weeks, we're going to often talk about how being a resource first will help us convert. But
Yes,
what's the next point
absolutely.
here that for today? What's our
So
next point?
related to that is the fact that referrals can help you shorten your sales cycle. Now, obviously, it depends on the type of product or service that you're offering, but just the fact that you're saving time in building the trust and credibility, it will save you time in your sales cycle. And the other is that referrals are a gift that can just keep on giving. As long as you keep asking for referrals, you have a source of great leads. Brynne, any thoughts on that?
So let's think about this, right? If we're starting, and this is going to help seasoned professionals
Yeah.
significantly more than the brand new rep, right? Like this is important because you've got these relationships. The brand new rep can build it over time, but if you've been in business for a few years and people know you and they've bought from you, and you, to John's point in comments, that you've brought enough value to the table, we're now hitting that 91% of these folks that are willing to refer us. And willing to refer us is not one-to-one necessarily. And we'll get into how
Mhm.
to do this in a little bit. But one client, well, let's think of, you have one client and one buyer that has many connections. You have one client with one buyer and three influencers with many connections.
Yes.
You have one client with one buyer, three influencers, and five users with lots of connections. So it's not, from that point, it's not one to one, right? There are many people within an organization where we've brought value that we can
Mhm.
get referrals from. And there are many referrals that we can get from each person. So if you go to your book of business and over the last 3 years, you've served 10 clients, there might be 50 people to reach out to. And of those 50 people, maybe there are 10 names that we want referrals to. So now, is that 500? Am I doing the math right?
If we're doing it like that, yep. If we're doing the 50 times 10,
Okay.
yeah.
So now we have 500 people to reach out to. And if you're good at what you do and what you sell has a need, you're going to close business in those 500, which will now be more people for you to get referrals from.
Froze from. Yep, thank you, because it is a never-ending building source of leads for you. John, thank you for sharing those resources. I did want to give a shout out to Rob Rashid. I haven't seen you in a while, so thank you for joining us. John, Chantel, everyone else, thanks so much. So let's dive into Sales Navigator. What makes Sales Navigator special as far as our ability to use it to generate referrals? Now, one of the aspects is, of course, the search filters and the additional search filters beyond LinkedIn. The one we'll start by talking about is just once you've set up your ideal customer profile, you can search based on second degree connections
Mhm.
and see those shared connections. I believe that's what Sales Nav. Why LinkedIn and Sales Navigator call mutual and shared connections different words, I don't
I
understand.
know. Because they're siloed and they don't talk to each
They
other.
don't talk to each other. Yeah.
But
Yep.
shared connections are perfect.
Yes. So you can see exactly who those are
Mhm.
and then put together a strategy for how you want to reach out to them. Brynne, any thoughts on that, just in terms of using Sales Nav's capability like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many amazing filters. We talked a little bit about them in a previous um, Sales Navigator Insights Live, whatever,
Yep.
but there are a few I just want to point out. My favorite is it used to be called Spotlights. On some people, it's
Y-
still Spotlights. Other
Mine is
people,
still spotlights. Yeah.
okay. On other people's, it keeps moving, but you want to look for um, the the filter that's shared on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. And the reason we want to do that is because these are active folks, right? And so as we're going to reach out, it's much better to engage with active folks than people that than people that don't show up on LinkedIn a whole lot. So I love that. Depending on what you do for a living, ultimately, there are other things like change jobs in the last 90 days. So
Mhm.
if you are someone that, maybe a financial advisor with a 401ks to roll over, or maybe you have a hard time getting into companies because they're really happy with their vendor and switching is difficult. Well, if someone is new in a job, they may be more open because they want to make change. So, using some of those filters and the second degree connection is magic. And what happens is you now get a list, let's say, of active people or job title change, and you get a whole list of all the people that meet your ideal customer profile, and you can see how many people you have in common. So I see Stan Robinson and I go, oh my gosh, we have 42 people in common. Now I can go through that list, highlight or identify, go, oh, Bob Woods. I know Bob Woods. Bob knows Stan. I'm going to reach out to Bob and say, hey, Bob, hope you're well. Noticed you're connected to Stan Robinson. I'm going to be reaching out to him in the next few days. But before I did, I was wondering, how well do you know him? And do you have any insights you might be able to share? And then I go to the next shared connection. I'm like, Gunnar Hood, you know Gunnar Hood? Gunnar, I know Gunnar Hood. Okay, I want to meet Stan. Gunnar, same message. Notice you're connected to Stan Robinson. I'm going to be reaching out to him in the next couple of days. Before I did, I'm wondering, how well do you know him? So of these 42 connections, maybe there's 8 or 10 that I actually send that note to. And 2 or 3 are going to come back and say, oh, yeah, Stan, he's great. I worked with him years ago. We went to the same college, which is a really good college, by the way. Both of them. um, go check out Stan's colleges. Yeah, or whatever you're, and a few might say, I see Stan's stuff, but I don't know that he's gonna, I don't know if he's gonna know me, right? Like so as we go through this list, the 42 becomes 2 or 3 or 4. And then based on my relationship, let's say with Gunnar, I can either, someone like Gunnar, I could say, would you be open to making an introduction? But let's say the people that come back to me, I don't know really well. They don't know what I do really well, but we're connected. I may just simply say, hey, thanks for the insights. When I reach out to Stan, should I tell him you said hello? And all of a sudden, they're like, oh, yeah, sure. I just took the pressure off them because they thought I was going to ask for an introduction and I don't know them well enough. I maybe have not built enough of that credibility yet with them, but I still want to leverage the connection. So I reach out and I'm like, Stan, I was chatting with Bob Woods on LinkedIn. Your name came up. When I was telling him a little bit about what I'm doing, he thought I should reach out and introduce myself. He says hello.
Yep.
Right. And, he says hello and like, oh, or if I didn't tell him at all what I was doing with you, I could just simply say, hey, Stan, was chatting with Bob Woods on LinkedIn. Your name came up. He says hello. The reason I'm reaching out is because I'd love your one-click vote on a poll. I'd love a quote for an ebook that I'm doing. Don't say I'm reaching out to sell you, but I'm reaching out because I want your thoughts, your value, your perspective on something. And it's a higher level of credibility, and I'm making you matter, right? So Stan is going to definitely
Yep.
say, sure, we'll talk. And by the way, it feels like a lot of work when I'm saying it. It's not a lot of work. And if, the number one objection we hear is, I just don't have time. Well, the amount of time it takes to do this to getting a 50% schedule rate, talk rate, conversation rate. How do you have time not to do this? Whatever you're spending your other time in, as Stan said earlier, there is no way, I believe, there is absolutely no way you're getting an ROI better than this for your time.
Yep. Yep. And this should stay up. Yep,
Okay,
on LinkedIn. So it's a
yeah,
good
so we
question, Jay.
had, yeah, Jay had a question for our listeners. Do you archive those previous insights? If you go to Stan's LinkedIn, you can look at his events in his activity and they'll all be there. This will also be, and if you're listening, you're like, it already is a podcast. So we'll have that where you'll be able to subscribe to the podcast as well. And if you're listening on the podcast, which is probably weeks after we've recorded this, please subscribe and follow our podcast. Um,
Yep,
yeah.
good. And
So,
Jay, I'm
yeah,
glad. Yeah, Gunner is awesome. I think
yeah.
we can all agree on that. So
All
yeah,
right. So you want to read this or shall I?
so real quick, great question, Rob. Been thinking about referrals a lot since I've only been in my territory for less than a year and still building relationships with current customers. I'm scared to ask for the connection. So thanks, Rob, because I know you're not the only one who'll be listening to this with that question.
Can I tackle this?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. So, you, I guess the question is, do you have happy clients yet? And if you don't, what I'd love for you to do is when you're talking with prospects, ask them who their other trusted advisors are that sell to them but are not competitors. And you just can say to them, hey, I'm looking to build my network of really strong X. Like for us, it's sales trainers or marketers, right? There are a lot of different folks that refer us. Sales trainers are our largest referral source because this is typically a gap, is the LinkedIn Sales Navigator, right? That's typically the gap that sales trainers don't have. So we fit into that perfectly. So we know that's a great place to prospect. So if you're talking with a prospect and maybe it's a weak prospect, you're just building relationship, you don't know where it's going yet, and you're building rapport, you can say, hey, I'm looking to meet X people. I noticed when we connected on LinkedIn before this meeting, you were connected to quite a few of them. Are there any that you know well enough that you think would be someone that I could, um, network with at a high level of credibility? And so use your connections to find referral partners. And then it's like at that point you'll start making introductions for one another. You've been here a year, hopefully you've got a lot of the right connections, and if they haven't closed for you, maybe by reconnecting them with someone else, it will get them remembering how great you are, and it could open up opportunities again as well.
Yep. Thank you, Rob. Yep, was a great question. Um, did want to, because this time always flies, did want to talk about one other capability. And you may say, well, you can do this in LinkedIn. Why are you bringing it up here? That fact that you can search someone else's connections. So if you have someone that you have a great relationship with, maybe you've done great work for them, you can plug their name in, like search Gunnar Hood's connections and see who they're connected to based on Sales Navigator's filters, which are so much more extensive than LinkedIn's.
Yeah, keep going, you're on a roll.
so the point being that you can really narrow down your search, because all of you who've been using Sales Navigator know that the challenge is never not having enough prospects. It's always, okay, how do I get this list from 1,500 down to about 200
Mhm.
that I can actually go through without feeling overwhelmed? So the ability to search your connections based on some very specific filters.
some
Go
of
ahead,
those
go ahead.
filters, now we talked about some of those spotlight, not spotlight anymore, but some of the filters at that point, sometimes like you and I are in the greater New York area,
Oh, yeah.
but sometimes like that, you have um, this huge list. So maybe I'm going to say Linden and Westfield and Clark and right. And I'm going to look at 5 towns. Or this is what you can do on Sales Navigator that you can't do in the free, a 10-mile radius,
Mhm.
right? So we can bring that down, especially if we're back on the road and we want to visit people in person.
In person. Yep, exactly. Exactly. And one other thing that we did want to point out also is that when in Sales Navigator, when you're in an account, you can look at your first degree connections within that account as well.
Mm.
So any of you, if you're doing account-based marketing or account-based selling, when you're in your account, because sometimes people change companies, and you may think, well, I know where my good buddy John Smith is working or what he's doing, but it's impossible to keep up with, especially once you've started to build a significant network. So Sales Nav can easily surface people for you at your target accounts. You can easily just look for your first degree connections at accounts that you're trying to penetrate.
Yeah, and this is a filter that went away from Sales Navigator, and I begged them. I'm like, This is so important." So I'd like to think I brought it back, but I'm sure I didn't. The bottom line, though, is whether they're the right person or the wrong person, they're in the right account, and so having that in with that can champion and even make some internal introductions is so powerful. I did this years ago with SunGuard. A friend of mine, it's my boy's friend Paige. Her mother worked at SunGuard. I reached out to her. Actually, I saw it on LinkedIn, but I reached out on Facebook because I had never had a LinkedIn engagement with her before, and we were friendly. So I reached out to Jean and we had a wonderful conversation, and she came to a class and then brought me in to meet the right people. It's a longer story than that, but then SunGuard became my client. So, she was not the decision maker, but she had enough relationships internally to get me there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I put up real quick, if you guys have like deeper questions that you want to get answered, if you go to socialsaleslink.com/events and scroll down, once a month we have a group coaching call that's open to everyone, and you could come in and ask Dan or myself any of your Sales Navigator questions. So I just wanted to put
Yeah, good deal.
that. Okay, is that it? Did
And
we go through everything?
we actually covered what we promised to. Along those lines, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to some of these, because one of the things I love about working with Brynne is the ideas that she talks about. They sound great when you listen to them the first time. When you go back and listen to them again, you say, oh my goodness, because she's all about being authentic. And
Mm,
I don't know if many of you may have mothers like mine who basically said, always tell the truth because then you don't have to remember what you said. So a
right.
small example, if Brynne is direct messaging with someone on LinkedIn, in her outreach, she says, I was chatting on LinkedIn with John or
Okay.
Sue, specifically on LinkedIn. So it doesn't make it sound like she was on the phone with the person.
Good point.
So something as small as that. And when you go back and listen to the recording again, you'll see exactly what I mean. So you'll pull some more nuggets from that.
Yeah, and if you happen to be on a phone call, you could say, I was on a phone call, I was on a Zoom call, but you're right. If it's just LinkedIn messaging, you need to be authentic. So thanks for bringing that out. We live in a world of a lot of inauthenticity, It doesn't mean that we need to follow suit. That's why we're anti-automation, everything, no one is answering my messages but me. And sometimes it takes a little longer for me to get to them, but know that it's me. um, and I think it's really, really important that I love that you said that this is our voice. It's
Mhm.
authentic, and that when we show up, it's exactly we match exactly the way we sound on LinkedIn is the way we're gonna sound. So I got to write gonna instead of going to, because that's how I sound. Um, sorry,
Yep.
but ultimately that we're going to sound the same way that we do. It's just important. So I appreciate that you brought that out. And by the way, that's one of the reasons I love working with you, because you are as authentic as it gets. So thank
Thank
you.
you. Much appreciated. And thanks to all of you for joining us. John, Rob, great question. Yep. Kurt, Jay, John, for the resources that you shared. And look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place. And
Yeah.
let your friends know. Brynne,
Bye,
thank you.
guys. Thank you.
Bye now.